How's it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the most rare and valuable coins in Canada. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the top 5 most undervalued Canadian coins. In the past, I have covered several of the most rare and valuable Canadian coins that you can find in your pocket change or coin roll hunting. But did you know that there are some overlooked coins that are hiding in plain sight or in your collections or change drawers that can be worth some big money? These are coins that most people pass over, but smart collectors know when they have incredible potential. So what exactly makes a coin undervalued? Sometimes it's a rare variety, sometimes an extremely low mintage, and sometimes it's a piece of history that the market just hasn't caught up to yet. Either way, these are the Canadian coins that you definitely want to keep an eye out for and have on your radar. Before we do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and ring that bell notification so you can stay up to date with my new content. And make sure to stick around until the end of the video, because one of these coins in particular could be a real sleeper hit. And then, without any further ado, what do you say we get right into it and discuss the top 5 most undervalued Canadian coins? Let's get it, guys. The 1965 large bead 5-cent piece was first discovered by Jerry Kennison of Vancouver, Washington in the year 1996. This story was written about in Canadian Coin News more than a decade ago, where it referred to the coin as the large bead / detached jewel variant. That article also discussed the many variations between the 1965 5-cent coins with small and large beads. To understand the emergence of the Canadian 1965 large bead nickel, we first need to take a trip back in time to the mid-1960s. Prior to 1963, Canadian nickels had a 12-sided shape, commonly referred to as a dodecagon. However, in 1963, the Royal Canadian Mint made the decision to transition towards a round-shaped nickel, resulting in the coins that we see today. Originally, Canadian 5-cent pieces were small and composed of silver. They are commonly referred to as fish scales, but when Canada switched to the large nickel, the larger Canadian 5-cent pieces produced after the year 1922 had a round shape, and they were produced that way up until the year 1942, when the introduction of the tomback nickel, which had a color very similar to the Canadian penny, was made in the dodecagon or 12-sided edge shape, so it would be more easily distinguishable between the penny. The Canadian Mint's decision to transition from the 12-sided shape back to the round-sided nickel was not without its challenges, as the Mint had to develop new technologies and machinery to produce the round-shaped nickels. The large bead variety of this 1965 nickel was most likely a result of experimentation with different edge treatments, ultimately leading to a design which would prevent excessive wear and tear on the coins. The transition from the dodecagon to the round-shaped nickel was just one of several factors that contributed to the creation of the 1965 large bead nickels. When changing the coin's shape, the Royal Canadian Mint had to replace the existing dies used in the production process. This changeover presented an opportunity for an error to occur during the manufacturing phase. Though the 1963 Canadian nickels aren't super notorious for errors, they can have machine doubling and some other minor errors, but the 1964 extra waterline nickel must be one of the most infamous Canadian coin varieties of the last 50 years, but this ultimately proves that it must have been a difficult time at the Mint because of the many changes and difficulties in production. Usually that means valuable error coins will follow. Now let's get into how to identify the Canadian 1965 large bead nickel. The defining characteristic lies in the number of beads that encircle the rim of the coin. The large bead nickel will contain 138 beads, whereas the small bead nickel will only have 119 beads. You would think that this would actually make it easy for collectors and enthusiasts to differentiate between the two variants, but it can actually be much more difficult than one would think. You can also look at the proximity of the beads relative to the rim of the coin. If the beads look like they are very close to or almost touching the rim, then it has a good chance of being the large bead variety. If there is a large gap between the beads and the rim, it is the small bead variety. Now, if the beads do seem like they are very close, or touching the rim, then and only then would I suggest that you go through the task of counting the individual beads to be thorough and make sure you have what you think you have. As for rarity, the Canadian 1965 large bead nickel holds an elevated position within the numismatic world. While collecting coins with errors is not unheard of, the occurrence of large bead nickels is believed to be extremely uncommon. This rarity, also combined with its unique history and distinctive design, contributes to its desirability among collectors and often makes it a prized piece in any collection. Now, I have found many rare coins and nickels in my searches and hunts over the years, and still this is one of my bucket listers, and it would definitely be a thrill to find such a prestigious and valuable coin variety in the wilds of circulation. Now, all of this being said, what do you say we get into the potential values for this incredibly rare Canadian 5-cent piece if you were ever to stumble upon one in your pocket change or coin roll hunting? First, we'll get into the low-end values because this can actually be a super valuable nickel even if you find one that is beat up and been put through the meat grinder. Now, this coin is actually not given a book value for low-grade examples, but I would say if you extrapolate downwards, it's probably worth anywhere from $20 to $50. If you find one that's all beat up and worn and been put through the meat grinder, people want these things and you don't stumble across them too often. So even if you find one that is in terrible condition in a coin roll hunt, you will still be able to make some decent money, maybe even $100 depending on how bad the person wants the coin. Now, it can be worth around $490 for a VF20 example, $1,240 for an AU50, and as we start to get into the MS range, it's worth around $1,630 for an MS60, $2,910 for an MS63, and this bad boy can be worth all the way up to $5,200 for an MS65 example. If you were ever to find one and it scored or graded any higher, you can be sure to see some massive price jumps. We could easily be talking a $10,000 nickel. Your best chance of probably finding one of these in a high mint state is to open an uncirculated roll of 1965s. Sometimes they'll sell uncirculated rolls at coin shops. My buddy actually bought an uncirculated roll of 1964 nickels for around $20. So if you're able to cherry pick a rollout and it had any of these large beads, then you can make some really good money. But more than likely, if you did buy a 1965 uncirculated roll, all of the nickels inside would have the large beads, or none of them will. That is usually how it works with these errors and varieties, because they will all be struck consecutively. Now, believe it or not, I have actually found 1967 rabbit nickel rolls uncirculated from banks in the past. So even though it might seem impossible or highly unlikely that there are uncirculated rolls of these old coins floating around out there, I can tell you for sure that there are some of them. Whether they've been sitting in the vaults of the bank for decades, or maybe someone inherits a collection and takes the rolls in to cash them in for face value, which would happen more than you would probably believe. I have always said if you hunt it, eventually you will find it, and this is definitely a good nickel to have on your radar. So before we get into the 2010 large bead loonie and discuss its identifying factors and value, I want to tell you guys some of the history and also an interesting story about the Canadian $1 coin. In most cases, because the loonie was put out for circulation as recent as 1987, there aren't too many dates or examples that are worth much more than face value, but the value of these coins will definitely increase over time, and the more you know about them, the better idea you will have of what to look for. The loonie, often known as the Canadian $1 coin, is a gold-colored coin issued by the Canadian Mint at its facility in Winnipeg. It was first launched in 1987. The common loon, a bird widespread across Canada, is depicted on the reverse of the coin's most frequent varieties, while Queen Elizabeth II, who was the head of the state at the time during the piece was issued, is depicted on the obverse. Over the years, other commemorative and specimen set editions of the coin have been produced, each one featuring a unique and colorful design in place of the loon on the reverse. Now, some of the specifications for the Canadian $1 coin: the loonie has an 11-sided polygonal shape. Its dimensions are 26.5 millimeters in diameter and 1.95 millimeters in thickness, which are nearly identical to those of the already in use Susan B. Anthony dollars from the United States, which have a 2.0 millimeter thickness. The color and shade of the Susan B. Anthony dollar was silver, but the succeeding Sacagawea and presidential dollars were gold, matching the loonie's overall shade. The 7-sided British 20 and 50 pence coins are other examples of coins that employ a non-circular curve of constant width. Following its introduction, the coin evolved into a slang name for the Canadian dollar. For instance, the media commonly discusses the loonies exchange rate to other currencies. The Royal Canadian Mint bought the loonies nickname trademark in the year 2006. The term toonie was given to the Canadian $2 coin when it was first introduced in the year 1996, so we have the Canadian $1 coin, the loonie, and the Canadian $2 coin, the toonie. On March 25, 1986, the government declared that the dollar bill will be phased out and that the new dollar coin would be introduced the following year. The initial 300 million coins were anticipated to cost $31.8 million to produce, but it was also predicted that the difference between the cost of production and the coin's value would generate up to $40 million annually from the coins. The 1988 Winter Olympics in Calgary were funded with a total of $60 million from the earnings spread over 5 years. Originally, when concept and design of the loonie first begun, it was planned that the coin would continue using the Voyager theme of its predecessor, but the master dies that had been struck in Ottawa were actually lost in transit to the Mint facility at Winnipeg. The Mint had delivered the master dies via a local courier in an effort to save $43.50, according to a Commons Committee formed to look into the loss. However, the Mint had no written policies or procedures for the transportation of master dies. Additionally, it was discovered that the Mint master had passed away 3 times in the previous 5 years. Although it was standard practice to ship the obverse and reverse dies individually, the new coin dies were packaged separately but delivered as a single shipment, according to a Royal Canadian Mint internal assessment. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police claimed that the dies were simply misplaced in transportation, but the Canadian Mint disagreed, insisted that they were actually stolen, though they were never found. The government approved a new reverse design, replacing the Voyager with a Robert Ralph Carmichael illustration of a common loon floating in water out of concern over possible counterfeiting. In Quebec, the coin acquired the nickname huard, which is French for loon, and it was soon referred to as the loonie across English Canada. On June 30th, 1987, 40 million loonies were introduced into significant cities all around the nation. By the coin's 20th anniversary, over 800 million loonies had been produced. The Bank of Canada stopped producing the $1 notes after a 21-month period, during which they were printed alongside the loonie. On June 30th, 1989, the final dollar bills were printed, although there was some initial resistance to the coin.
I think it stinks.
Why?
You realize how heavy a woman's wallet or purse is going to be?
Going to get mixed up with other coinage and cause all kinds of problems. Another bad idea.
I hate it.
I prefer the bills, truthful. I just not because it's faulty in the box.
The withdrawal of the banknote forced acceptance. Eventually, the loonie became well known and is today regarded as a national emblem in Canada. Since then, the name loonie has come to refer to the Canadian dollar itself. In 1992, Robert Ralph Carmichael's hometown of Echo Bay, Ontario, created a sizable loonie monument in his honor alongside the road, akin to Sudbury's Big Nickel. So now that I've given you guys some of the story behind this extremely iconic Canadian coin, what do you say we discuss the 2010 large bead variety loonie, which if found in a high-grade state can be worth some really good money. Now there were 4 different designs put out for circulation in the year 2010 for the Canadian $1 coin. The large bead variety can be found on the regular loon reverse design. The other reverse designs feature the Saskatchewan Rough Riders, a Navy commemorative, and also one for the Vancouver Olympics. The large bead loonie is referred to as a Type 1 and the small bead is considered Type 2. There are several ways to check for the large beads on this coin, the easiest of which should be to flip over to the obverse and look at the A in Elizabeth. If it's the large bead, the A should point directly to a bead. You can also look at the I in Regina, and the I should point between the denticles. If you can identify both of those factors, then you have the large bead loonie, and that's the one that you are looking for. So let's discuss the value of this coin. Unfortunately, there aren't too many loonies out there to look for that you can retire from at this point, but when it comes to collecting, sometimes you have to play the long game. Just because a coin isn't worth a fortune today doesn't mean that it can't easily change. The 2010 large bead loonie isn't worth much more than face value in a low-grade state, I'm sure you could all sell one for a premium if someone really wanted to fill a hole in their collection or album. Even at an MS65, it is only worth around $50. If you were to find one in a higher grade, you could easily see some price jumps. I wouldn't doubt that you can maybe get or sell one if it graded around an MS67 for $300 or more. It feels crazy to say that 2010 was 13 years ago, but in terms of numismatics, that is nothing. And because this loonie is so modern, it makes finding high-grade examples much more possible. So even though you won't get rich off of this loonie if you find one of them coin roll hunting or in your pocket change today, it is still a good one to pull out and keep off to the side, especially if it is in a really good condition. You could send it off to be graded by a company like PCGS or NGC, and then you could turn around and sell it for a profit at either your local coin shop or maybe eBay or Facebook Marketplace. Those are the best places usually to buy and sell coins. I have people ask me that all the time. The Canadian Mint's transition to multi-ply plating technology in the year 2000 marked a significant shift in the production of Canadian circulation coinage. This innovative method, patented by the Canadian Mint, aimed at saving costs while enhancing the durability and security of coins. Prior to the adoption of multi-ply plating, coins such as the 5, 10, 25, and 50-cent pieces were minted from nearly pure nickel alloys and silver in earlier years. Eventually, the $1 and $2 coins also underwent this process in the year 2012. The multi-ply plating process involves electromagnetically plating a steel core with thin layers of nickel, copper, and another layer of nickel. This method reduces the quantity of copper and nickel required for each coin, thus lowering production costs for the mint. Additionally, the composition of the plated coins are more durable, leading to a decrease in the number of damaged coins in circulation. This increased durability translates to greater efficiency in the overall coinage system. One of the key advantages of multi-ply plating is its ability to create coins with unique electromagnetic signatures by varying the thickness of the alternating layers of nickel and copper. This feature enhances the security of coins, making them less susceptible to counterfeiting. With distinct electromagnetic signatures, the mint can easily detect fraudulent coins, ensuring the integrity of Canadian currency. The adoption of multi-ply plating technology by the Canadian Mint not only brought about cost savings and enhanced durability, but also contributed to the security of Canadian circulation coins. This process allows for the precise control over the composition and properties of circulation coinage, ensuring consistency and reliability in their production. The Canadian Mint's commitment to innovation underscores its dedication to providing the most secure circulation coins in the entire world. Over the years, multi-ply plating has become a standard practice for the production of Canadian circulation coins, demonstrating its effectiveness and efficiency. By continuously refining and improving their production methods, the Canadian Mint remains at the forefront of coinage technology, setting the standards for both quality and security in the industry for years to come. The Mint's switch to multi-ply plated technology revolutionized the production of Canadian circulation coins, offering cost savings, increased durability, and enhanced security. With precise control over composition and the creation of unique electromagnetic signatures, multi-ply plating has become integral to the Mint's commitment to providing reliable and secure currency for Canadians. Now, what do you guys say that we discuss the coin that you are all here to find out about? The 2000p Canadian nickel stands out as a rare and highly sought after coin among collectors due to its distinct characteristics and also limited mintage. Unlike its more common counterpart, the 2000 nickel without a P or composition mark, the 2000p Canadian nickel can be identified by locating a small P mint or composition mark underneath Queen Elizabeth II's bust on the obverse side of the coin. This subtle yet incredibly important marking sets it apart and adds to its overall rarity. With a mintage of only 4,899,000, the 2000p nickel is significantly scarcer compared to the standard 2000 nickel, which has a much higher mintage of 105,868,000. This lower mintage figure contributes to its desirability among collectors, as scarcity often enhances the value and appeal of a coin. Also, being one of the first Canadian circulation coins released with the P composition mark for circulation adds another layer of rarity and historical significance to this 5-cent coin. The rarity of the Canadian 2000p nickel combined with its unique composition mark makes it a coveted item among numismatists. Collectors are drawn both to its scarcity and also the challenge of acquiring such a distinct piece of Canadian coinage history. High-grade examples of this coin can command significant prices ranging from hundreds to possibly even thousands of dollars, especially if it is in impeccable condition. The main draw and appeal of one of these 2000p nickels extends beyond its rarity and limited mintage. Its design and quality also contribute to its desirability. The obverse of the coin features the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, and on the reverse, the coin has the iconic beaver design. Now, back when I was in the prime of my coin roll hunting career and I was searching a few boxes of nickels a week, I would stumble across these 2000Ps somewhat regularly. Depending on where you are in the country, you will find more or less of them, but I found about one per box, and usually you will find that they look a lot nicer than the standard Canadian 2000 nickel without the mint mark. It is a little bit shinier, and because of that multi-ply plating, it adds a layer of sheen that the regular ones just do not have. For just about any collector or fan of Canadian coins, the 2000p nickel represents not only a valuable asset, but also a piece of coinage history. Each coin tells a story of Canada's numismatic evolution and serves as a tangible reminder of the country's cultural and economic significance. Whether held onto as a potential investment or cherished as a treasured keepsake, the 2000p Canadian nickel holds a special place in the hearts of collectors worldwide, and I would say it is definitely the bread and butter of coin roll hunting Canadian nickels. It stands out as both rare and desirable with its distinctive P mint or composition mark and its extremely limited mintage. Both the scarcity, historical significance, and the aesthetic appeal make it a prized possession for numismatists. Now, some of the details and specifications for these coins, you will find that the specifications will be different for the regular or standard Canadian 2000 nickel without a P mint mark than they are for the multi-ply plated version. First, I will give you guys the specifications for the standard 2000 nickel. Now, the Canadian 2000 nickel without any mint or composition marks has a mintage figure of 105,868,000. It is actually composed of cupronickel, so that is 75% copper, 25% nickel. It should have a weight of 4.6 grams, a diameter of 21.2 millimeters. It should have a diaxis in metal alignment, and it was designed and engraved by Dora DePadre Hunt for the obverse and G.E. Kruger Gray for the reverse. Now on to the 2000p Canadian nickel, which can be identified for looking for that small p mint or composition mark underneath the bust of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse of the coin. Now the 2000p has a much lower mintage figure of 4,899,000. It has a composition of multi-ply plated steel, which is 94.5% steel, 3.5% copper, and 2% nickel. It has a weight of 3.95 grams, a diameter of 21.1 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.76 millimeters. Its diaxis should also be in metal alignment, as is the standard for most Canadian, British, and Australian coins, and the designers are the same Dora DePadre Hunt for the obverse and G.E. Kruger Gray for the reverse. Now, as we get into the values for the 2000p Canadian nickel, unfortunately this coin does not hold a ton of value on the low end, but I can personally attest that some people will pay a premium for them just to have it in their collection, especially American collectors or anyone who is interested in Canadian coins from another country. This one can be really difficult to find if you are not actually coin roll hunting in Canada or searching your pocket change, so people are willing to pay anywhere from $1 to $5 usually for a pretty beat up and worn example of one of these. But one thing you will find is that usually when you find one of these 2000p Canadian nickels, it will be in pretty good shape, or at least a little bit better than the standard 2000 nickels will look. Now, as we start to get into the mint state range, this one isn't super valuable even on the low end of the MS scale, but it can be worth around $10 for an MS64. Then we start to see some pretty big price jumps. It can be worth around $30 for an MS65, around $275 for an MS66, and all the way up to $700 for an MS67. Now, it will be really difficult to score that high grade, but if you are able to obtain that, even if you find an uncirculated roll of 2000 Ps, you might just hit the jackpot. If it does score any higher, an MS68 or 69, I don't doubt that you could easily get $1,000. This is a super rare coin, and even though it is somewhere around 24 years old as I am making this video, finding them in circulation in a high mint state just doesn't happen too often, so always keep your eyes open because you never know what you can find in your pocket change. So before we do get into the value and specifications for the 1991 quarter, I thought I would go over some of the story of how a coin with such a limited mintage can actually come into existence. Coin mintage refers to the quantity of a specific coin design produced by a mint during a particular year or time period. It is a fundamental aspect of a coin's history and production. The rarity of coins is usually measured on how scarce or uncommon they are in relativity to its total mintage. Coins with lower mintages are generally considered more rare because there are fewer of them available to collectors or the public. Several factors contribute to the rarity of a coin, including mintage numbers. Coins with low mintage numbers are inherently rare. When fewer coins are minted, there are fewer available to collectors to acquire. Survival rate. The number of coins that have survived over time also affects rarity. Coins that were well preserved or saved by collectors are more likely to be available today. Melting and withdrawal. Changes in composition or economic factors like the alloy recycling program can lead to the withdrawal and melting of coins. This reduces the number of surviving specimens and increases the rarity of some dates. Coins that have garnered significant collector interest tend to be less common in the market due to collectors acquiring and holding on to them. Rarity is a critical factor in determining the value of a coin. Generally, rarer coins command higher prices in the numismatic market. Collectors and investors are often willing to pay a premium for coins that are difficult to obtain due to their limited availability. The condition or grade of a rare coin can also significantly impact its value. Coins in excellent condition are more desirable to collectors and can fetch higher prices. Usually coins with low mintage figures will also hold some historical significance. They may mark a special period, event, or a change in coinage history. This historical context adds to their appeal and value. Numismatists value coins that provide insights into the past, and low mintage coins often do just that. Collector preferences can drive demand for specific coins. Coins that are part of a series or set have unique designs or represent specific milestones and are highly sought after. Collector demand can create competition and influence prices, particularly for rare and desirable coins. Market trends, including auction results and changing collector tastes, can impact the value of coins. Prices for some key dates may fluctuate based on market dynamics and also demand from buyers. Another major factor that could have led to the creation of the Canadian 1991 quarter is labor disputes and strikes. Labor disputes, strikes, or work stoppages at a mint can disrupt normal coin production operations. Mint employees, including coin press operators, engravers, and other key personnel, may participate in strikes to demand better working conditions, higher wages, or other labor-related issues. Strikes often lead to production delays, as mint facilities may operate at reduced capacity or cease production altogether during this strike period. This can result in a backlog of coins that need to be minted once the strike is resolved. A strike can directly impact the mintage numbers for a given year or denomination. If the work strike occurs during the planned production window for a particular coin, the mint might not actually be able to produce as many coins were as originally intended. This can lead to a lower mintage for the affected coin. Strikes may also affect the quality of coins produced during and immediately following the strike period. Mint employees returning to work after a strike may need some time to ensure that the coin presses and equipment are operating smoothly, potentially impacting the quality of the struck coins. In the case of the 1991 Canadian quarter, if there was indeed a strike at the Canadian Mint during that year, it could have contributed to the lower mintage of quarters for that specific date. The disruption in production and potential quality control issues may have led to a scarcity of well-struck, uncirculated specimens, further enhancing the coin's rarity and desirability. Now, some of the reasons that the 1991 Canadian quarters are considered so rare compared to their counterparts in the similar date ranges. In 1991, the Canadian Mint produced a significantly lower number of these quarters compared to other years. This limited mintage is a key factor in the coin's rarity. The exact reasons for this low mintage are not always publicly disclosed by mints, but there are a few potential explanations. Economic factors. Economic conditions can influence a mint's decision to reduce coin production. In times of economic uncertainty or budget constraints, mints may reduce the production of certain denominations, including quarters, to save on costs. So, foreseeing the production of the 1992 provincial series, they may have actually reduced the size of the production run for 1991 quarters. I don't think they intended to reduce it that small, but that would definitely be a good reason right there. Supply and demand. If there was a surplus of quarters from previous years in circulation and a reduced demand for new quarters, the mint may have decided to produce fewer coins to avoid an oversupply. While the reverse design of the 1991 quarter was not unique or commemorative, it's possible that the Canadian Mint still opted for a lower mintage that year based on their production plans and priorities. Over time, the low mintage of the 1991 quarter gained the attention of coin collectors and numismatists worldwide. The combination of a low mintage figure and the regular design led to increased demand among collectors, further driving up its rarity and value in the secondary market. Many of the 1991 quarters that were minted entered circulation where they endured wear and tear. As a result, finding well-preserved uncirculated specimens from that year became increasingly challenging, contributing to their rarity. So what do you say we go over some of the specifications and give you guys the potential values if you did ever discover one of these in your pocket change or coin roll hunting? So the Canadian 1991 quarter has a mintage figure of 459,000. It is composed of 100% nickel. It has a weight of 5.05 grams, a diameter of 23.88 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.58 millimeters. The coin was designed and engraved by Dorda Pedri Hunt and Ago Aran for the obverse and Emmanuel Hahn for the reverse. The edge is reeded, it is magnetic, and it comes in metal alignment as is the standard for most Canadian coins. Now, one of the greatest things about this 1991 quarter is that it is a coin that retains a premium even on the low end. If you find one of these and it's all beat up and been put through the meat grinder and it's at the very bottom of the Sheldon grading scale, you can still get some decent money for it, around $5 to $10, which is a decent profit considering that you only invested 25 cents to find the coin. But when you start to get into the MS region, you start to see some pretty big price jumps. It can be worth around $10 for an MS60, around $20 for an MS64, and all the way up to $120 for an MS66. And this is a coin that's value is only going to go up over time. It doesn't just have one of the lowest mintage figures of any Canadian coin in the last 50 years, but any coin produced in North America, probably within the last 150 years. This is an incredibly rare coin, but it is one that is fairly modern and they are still floating out there. I've known several Canadian coin roll hunters that have found even a few of these in their coin roll hunts, and I know that you can find them in your pocket change too, so it is definitely a good one to keep your eyes out for, and I only see the value going up on these bad boys as time goes on. In 1942, the Royal Canadian Mint introduced a unique 12-sided design for the nickel as a strategic response to a specific concern related to the coin's appearance. During this period, Canadian nickels were primarily composed of tombac, an alloy of copper and nickel. However, the tombac's bronze color closely resembled that of Canadian pennies, which were also predominantly copper. To avoid confusion and facilitate easy differentiation between the nickel and the penny, the Canadian Mint decided to change the nickel's shape to a distinctive dodecagonal or 12-sided form. This innovative design served as a practical purpose, allowing people to quickly and visually distinguish between the 12-sided nickel and the round penny, even if they shared a similar color. During World War II and the Korean War, the Canadian Mint faced the challenge of metal shortages due to demands of wartime industries. To conserve precious metals for critical war efforts, the composition of Canadian nickels underwent significant changes. This started in the early 1940s with the introduction of the tombac nickels, and that eventually evolved in the late World War II years to steel coated with nickel with an additional chrome plating layer measuring 0.127 millimeters and 0.0003 millimeters. The introduction of the steel-based coins was a strategic decision to save essential metals for the production of munitions during the war. The transition to steel coins was not unique to Canada. Several other countries around the world adopted similar measures to support their wartime economies and needs. Following the conclusion of World War II and the Korean War, the Royal Canadian Mint gradually returned to nickel as the primary component in the 1950s. The shift back to traditional 99.9% nickel composition allowed the Canadian Mint to return to using the round rim design in the year 1963. The advancements in metallurgic technologies allowed for the efficient use of nickel without compromising the coin's integrity, marking the end of steel-based coins for several decades. Now, the date that you are looking for this nickel is 1963, and if you want to be able to identify this error, we should briefly go over how rotated die errors can occur during coin production. Rotated die errors on Canadian coins can be attributed to misalignments or instability during the coin minting process. While it may be challenging to determine which of the two dies is responsible for the rotation, these errors occur for two major reasons: stable rotation and dynamic rotation. First, let's go over stable rotation. This type of rotation occurs when one of the two dies is misaligned during installation, leading to a stable degree of rotation for subsequent strikes. The effect of this is that multiple coins are produced with a consistent degree of rotation, and this misalignment is assumed to be the cause. The second type of rotation is dynamic rotation. Dynamic rotation occurs when one of the dies becomes loose during striking, leading it to rotate in its axis. This type can result in varying degrees of rotation. Coins struck with dynamic rotation may have different degrees of rotation depending on the instability of the rotating die during the striking process. To determine the rotation degree, one needs to measure the rotated side in relation to the other side of the coin. This measurement is crucial for evaluating the extent of the rotation. The Canadian 1963 nickel in coin alignment is an error that involves the coin being rotated 180 degrees during the minting process. In a typical minting process, coins are aligned in a specific way to ensure consistent and accurate strikes. However, in the case of the Canadian 1963 nickel struck in coin alignment, the coin was struck in such a way that the reverse and obverse side are upside down in relation to each other, very similar to American coins. The notable feature of this error is the reverse side of the coin, which features the beaver design, is rotated 180 degrees compared to the obverse side. This coin alignment error is considered a minting anomaly where the coin is improperly aligned during the striking process. Coin alignment errors, especially those involving 180 degree rotations, can generate significant interest among numismatists and collectors. The uniqueness of this error adds a distinctive characteristic to the coin. So, some of the details and specifications for the 1963 Canadian nickel in coin alignment of any of these are off and may indicate that the coin is not authentic. So first, we will start off with the mintage figure for the 1963 Canadian nickel. The 1963 nickel has a mintage figure of 43,970,000, and the 1963 struck in coin alignment is included in that mintage figure. There's probably only a couple hundred examples or less that exist. Now, the specifications for this coin: it is composed of 100% nickel. It has a weight of 4.54 grams, a diameter of 21.21 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.75 millimeters. The obverse was designed and engraved by Mary Gillick, and the reverse was designed and engraved by G.E. Kruger Gray and Thomas Shingles. The edge of the coin is round. It is the first year that they returned to the round rims for Canadian nickels. It is non-magnetic, and the die axis is in coin alignment, as is the standard for American coins, but it is not intended to be in coin alignment. It is a rotated die error. Now, when it comes to determining the value for this nickel, it can be extremely tricky. It is actually listed as an error on PCGS's website, and it is also listed on the Coins in Canada website, but Coins in Canada does not give any evaluations for this coin. Now, PCGS lists a sale on eBay in 2022 where an MS65 example sold for $201, but there have actually been regular 1963s that have sold for way more than that. So I'm not too sure what is going on with that, but if you do find one in an MS65 to MS67, I don't doubt that you might be able to get anywhere from $500 to $1,000, depending on how much somebody wants to add this to their collection. It is a pretty significant error, and if it gets the attribution from PCGS, it will definitely add some interest and garner some attention as well. Now, what do you guys think about the 1963 Canadian nickel struck in coin alignment? What would you do if you ever found a legitimate example, or if you ever have found any of the coins that I discussed in this video? Let me know down in the comments. I would love to know. Also, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can stay up to date with my new content as it is being released. But I think that is pretty much going to do it for this one, folks. So until the next one, everybody, peace out and have a good one, y'all.